Empathy is an interesting thing because you have to be able to share experiences with those that you are having the empathy for, which means that you have to have some connection or experience with what the person is going through or experiencing in order to understand them. And that's really what empathy becomes, is this understanding of what the person is thinking, feeling, their being. And so to be empathetic, you have to have a level of understanding for yourself. You have to go through experiences that are like what the person is going through to make those connections. So in understanding yourself, you've got to be truthful with yourself. You have to understand what those things are in your life, both strengths and weaknesses. So I know myself to be an introvert. I like to be alone most of the time, but I've been exercised enough as an extrovert that I can play along with it for a while. But it does really drain me if it's sustained. If I'm in public situations, like malls are the worst, but I can do fairs and things like that for a certain amount of time, but then ultimately I need time alone. That's probably why I hike and travel by myself so much. But ultimately, these become recognitions of strengths and weaknesses. And so looking at the areas of wellness, the physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual, you start measuring these things, comparing them to another, and seeing how they affect one another. Because ultimately, if you are weak in one area, it affects the other areas, and you can't grow in them. The only way that you can grow is to address all the situations where you're weak and where you're strong, and be completely honest to face the hard truths. And this becomes difficult because facing hard truths or your weaknesses or what you're lacking, nobody really wants to address those. But it's the only way to experience growth. So looking at students, it becomes a puzzle. You look at how they act, what they wear, who they engage with, how they talk about things, all these little puzzle pieces about their being. And it becomes apparent to those who are sensitive enough or take the time to, that there are certain puzzle pieces that are missing or need to be addressed. That one little tree is popping off. So what I would consider a good teacher takes the time to recognize these things, think about them, and address them. But the problem is addressing them to the students, because in this day and age, sensitivity is at an all-time high. People are easily offended because they don't want to deal with these things. They want to ignore them. It takes somebody with strength to address the problems that they have. And it's scary, you know, like if you're dealing with things like lying or cheating or stealing or not being able to deal with your emotions or anything like that, it's hard. It's scary because you are not exercised, you're weak. And figuring out those weaknesses and exercising them, it does not feel good in the beginning. But the more you address those things, the stronger you get. It's like anything else. If you haven't been exercising in a long time and you start exercising sucks. But if you keep with it, it gets easier and easier and easier. It takes practice, development. So the question then becomes, in this day and age, do we ignore those things out of sparing somebody moments of uncomfort? Or do we address them? Do we say, this is what you need to do to make your life better? Is that the purpose of teaching? To ultimately develop students strong enough so that they don't need you. But that also means that you're going to get some pushback from students, from parents, because they want to protect them. They don't want to hurt. They don't want their children to hurt. But if they don't, they will hurt essentially for the rest of their lives, or until they come to the realization. But you can't know what you can't know, or don't want to know, more so. Being ignorant is relatively the zeitgeist that we are facing. So when you're dealing with something like a self-portrait, there's a lot of confessions in that. Like, did the student spend time? Do they have the technical skills? Do they actually think about this? Are they addressing the things about themselves? Are they playing it safe? And ultimately, art shows progression. There's no two ways about it. Like, I do these 4 squares. These they take a sheet of paper and they split it in half and split it in half again, so they've got 4 different sections on the paper. And one section's a person, one section's a house, one section's a tree, and in the 4th square they can draw anything that they like. Underline, exclamation point, like. So they have to think about, what are they interested in? What are they good at? What do they have a lot of experience with? And so I collect these. And over the years, I see the difference from one semester to the next, one year to the next. And these become the tracers, the assessments of the development of the students. But if you have students that are drawing like they're much younger, or they're drawing the exact same thing year after year, semester after semester, it becomes a warning, an alert that these students are either choosing or have some kind of, for lack of a better term, trauma that's causing them to stick in this same situation. So, as an art teacher, my job is to help them to develop their art, which means having to address what they are as a being in all the areas of wellness: physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual, because these ultimately hold back the artwork. The artwork is a cross section, a capture the moment. This is what this kid is in this moment of time, or anybody who makes an artwork that really spends time on it. So that's why I present these things that are iconic, that are recognizable, like they're without any severe damage in one way or another. A kid knows what a person looks like. They know what a house looks like. They know what a tree looks like. They've got experience with it. So these often become very iconic. You get the stick figures and the puffy with the 2 lines for the tree, the triangle on top of the square that represents the house, because they're safe, they're easy. So the students, people in general, stay with what's comfortable to develop would mean that they would have to push themselves to uncomfort. And these become more specific. Anytime it's generalized, it's easy because, oh, that's fast, everybody will recognize it, it's safe because of that recognition. But if you start becoming more specific, so take a person, if you draw a stick figure, generally speaking, most people will understand that a stick figure is representative of a person. It's not a specific person, it's just whoever. It's a person. But the moment that becomes a likeness of someone, a representation of someone, then you have to get more specific. What does this person look like? Their hair, their eyes, their nose, mouth, ears, face shape, body shape, height, and even more specific to their personalities. What clothing do they wear? How do they carry themselves? Do they slouch? Do they stand up tall? Are they active? Things like that. So how you represent a person becomes very intimate, because it's not only the representation of them, but it's a representation of the person who is doing the artwork skills and thoughts, and this is how I perceive them, and here's my technical skills that I'm able to see these. So these become very scary. But recognizing what those limitations are, or that those areas of development, levels of development. If a kid is drawing this way, and this might not happen at a particular age. Some kids can do very technical work from a very early age. Some take longer. And so these areas of development become apparent because of the way that they portray their works, their technical skills, their recognition. So this becomes the purpose of the activity of doing the four squares and the self-portraits. Now, some kids just don't put in the effort. They don't care because they don't see the point. But to explain to them that this is what this means, this is what I see, imbuing them with empathy. I am teaching you to see what I see so that you can understand what you are doing, what this truly means to somebody who is educated or aware about what these self-portraits and things mean. And ultimately, this should not be a malicious proposition. It's not meant to hurt, although it might. Ultimately, this is to help in the long run, to bring the student to a level where they are recognizing issues that they can build and improve on so that they can develop wholly as a person. So if somebody's lacking on the mental end, they should be doing research of subject matter, building that visual library. If their physical skills, their technical skills are low, they should be doing technical practices. If they are emotionally shut off, they don't care, that means they won't even do the work. So they need to recognize and develop their desire to be better. The social then becomes where they are playing off of what they see and interact. So they need to have a level of, I understand this way, and other people understand it this way, and therefore there needs to be a connection, a communication of what I'm doing, a critique. How do you see this the same way I do? Is there some way I can improve this? And then the spiritual is tying this all together, like recognizing what these pieces fit in the grand scheme. If I know how to draw a person And well, I can insert this into drawing animals, drawing different gestures, mannerisms, depth, distance, things like that. And putting this all together, essentially the Foursquare deals with the four major areas. People, who is the who, the environments, which are the trees and the houses, and what's the interaction. So what's the action that's happening? Why is that person there? What's that person doing at that house or by that tree or that environment? So these become the basics. And then there's the question of, what do you like? What are you interested in? What are you good at? What do you have experience with? And these become the means to send that kid in that direction. I like this. Great. Let's develop those skills. Let's build you a direction where you can pursue something that you like. Build those skills. Find a job. Find a career. Find significant others. Find friends. Find places. And ultimately, if you can't do this in an art classroom, where can you? Where does this education come from? Sure, you can get it from parents and friends and things like that, but that becomes what is being taught in art, how to find these things. If you don't want it from me, here's the skills that you can find it on your own. Because ultimately, like I said before, the grand scheme of being a teacher is to get the students to a level where they don't need the teacher. You have these skills, you have these capabilities. Go out into the world and flourish. But that also means having to deal with this understanding, which may or may not be happy, sad, angry, disgusting. It's dealing with the world, all the things that are around us and that we may or may not experience, preparing for the unknown. So empathy, recognizing this, how this all fits, like recognizing my experience so I can better regard this to students and their understanding and helping them, because ultimately, again, empathy is about the best interests of the kids or the people or anybody that you come in contact with. I'm not doing this to be mean. This is to help you in the long run, whether you see it now or not. So that's all I have to say about that. Do more, do better.